Long before the United States declared itself a nation, the land was already alive with stories, traditions, and systems of governance that had existed for thousands of years. The Native American tribes who lived across the continent had built thriving communities long before any European ship reached the shores of the Atlantic. From the Iroquois Confederacy in the northeast to the Pueblo people in the southwest, native societies had developed political alliances, spiritual traditions, and economic networks that connected diverse regions of North America. Their relationship with the land was not just about survival, it was about belonging. Every river, mountain, and valley had a story. Every season carried lessons passed down through generations. When European settlers arrived, they encountered people who already understood the complexities of this land better than anyone else. The early survival of many colonies, including Jamestown and Plymouth, depended directly on native knowledge. The Powhatan people taught English settlers how to cultivate corn and use local resources. The Wampanoag tribe shared their understanding of the changing seasons, which became the foundation of the first successful harvest that the settlers later celebrated as Thanksgiving. These exchanges were more than simple acts of generosity, they were acts of cultural bridging that made the foundation of America possible. Without native cooperation, those early settlements may never have survived their first winters. But the Native American role in America's rise was not only about helping others survive. Their influence stretched into the very ideas that shaped American democracy. The Iroquois Confederacy, known as the Haudenosaunee, had a structured political system built around consensus and representation. Their great law of peace emphasized unity, collective decision-making, and the balance of power among different nations. Early American leaders, including Benjamin Franklin and Thomas Jefferson, studied the Iroquois system. The concept of a union of states working together for a common good drew clear inspiration from this model. The idea that no single voice should dominate, that freedom must rest on cooperation, was already part of Native philosophy long before the Constitution was written. Yet as America began to grow, the story of Native Americans became one of both contribution and exclusion. In the early years of the new republic, many tribes served as allies, translators, and guides in the exploration and mapping of the vast lands that would later define the United States. When Lewis and Clark embarked on their famous expedition in 1804, they relied heavily on native knowledge. Sacagawea, a Shoshone woman, played a crucial role not only as an interpreter but as a symbol of peace among tribes they encountered. Her presence helped the explorers navigate territories that were foreign to them but deeply familiar to her people. At the same time, the new nations who. As the 19th century unfolded, America's hunger for land and progress only grew stronger. The frontier expanded westward, railroads crossed mountains, and settlers pushed into territories once filled with buffalo, forests, and sacred ground. For Native Americans, this period was not just one of loss, it was one of adaptation, resilience, and survival in the face of overwhelming change. The tribes that had once lived freely across the plains, deserts, and valleys were forced to redefine what it meant to exist within a nation that often denied their very right to do so. Despite being pushed to the margins, Native Americans continued to influence the development of the country in ways often overlooked by mainstream history. Their knowledge of the land remained essential. Explorers, trappers, and soldiers depended on native guides to navigate vast and unfamiliar regions. They knew the terrain, the weather patterns, and the behavior of the animals better than anyone else. When the U.S. Army marched west, many of its scouts were native men who used their skills to help others move through terrain that would otherwise have been impassable. The irony of it all was that these same men often found themselves guiding the very forces that would later occupy their lands. During the Civil War, Native Americans faced a difficult choice. Both the Union and the Confederacy sought their allegiance, promising protection and autonomy. Some tribes sided with the Union, believing that loyalty might secure a better future. Others joined the Confederacy, hoping it would mean independence from federal control. The Cherokee Nation itself was divided, with brothers fighting on opposite sides. More than 20,000 native men took part in the conflict. They fought, not only out of duty or survival, but with the hope that their courage would earn respect and recognition from a nation that had long overlooked them. Yet when the war ended, promises made to them were quickly forgotten. In the years that followed, government policies became harsher and more systematic. The reservation system confined tribes to limited territories, cutting them off from traditional hunting grounds and resources. Children were taken from their families and placed in boarding schools, where they were forbidden to speak their languages or practice their traditions. These policies aimed to erase native identity in the name of civilization. Yet, even under these conditions, their spirit endured. Elders whispered stories in the dark. Women taught songs and languages in secret. Communities found ways to maintain their ceremonies and beliefs even when the law forbade them. At the same time, native resistance grew stronger. Great leaders rose during this period: Sitting Bull, Crazy Horse, Geronimo, Chief Joseph, names that would later echo through American history as symbols of bravery and defiance. They were not just warriors fighting battles, they were defenders of a way of life. The Battle of the Lee. By the mid-20th century, America was entering a period of reflection and transformation. The world wars had reshaped the nation's role on the global stage, and within its borders, people were beginning to question what equality and freedom truly meant. For Native Americans, this was not a new question. They had been living it for centuries. Yet in this new era, their fight for recognition and justice began to gain visibility. The old image of the silent, vanishing Indian was replaced by something real and alive, a people demanding their rightful place in the country they had helped shape. After returning from World War II, many Native veterans came home determined to change the conditions they saw in their communities. They had fought for democracy abroad, and now they wanted it at home. Across reservations and cities, new voices began to rise. Young leaders called for self-determination, sovereignty, and respect for Native culture. In the 1950s and 60s, as the civil rights movement gained strength, Native Americans found inspiration in the broader fight for justice. They saw that the same principles, freedom, dignity, equality, applied to their own struggle. The 1960s were a turning point. Native communities began to organize at a national level. In 1968, the American Indian Movement, known as AIM, was founded in Minneapolis. What started as a response to police brutality and discrimination grew into a major force for Native rights. Its members demanded control over education, land, and law enforcement in their own territories. They called for the government to honor the hundreds of treaties that had been broken over the centuries. Their activism was bold, sometimes confrontational, but always rooted in a deep sense of justice. The occupation of Alcatraz Island in 1969 captured global attention. For 19 months, Native activists held the abandoned prison, declaring it native land under old treaty rights. The act was symbolic, but its message was powerful: the first peoples of this land were still here, still resisting, still shaping the nation's conscience. The movement gained further momentum in 1973, when members of AIM and supporters occupied the town of Wounded Knee in South Dakota, the same place where hundreds of Lakota Sioux had been massacred in 1890. The standoff lasted for 71 days and became a symbol of Native defiance against generations of injustice. Though it ended under tense and difficult circumstances, it reignited awareness of Native struggles across the country. Out of that movement came lasting changes, renewed cultural pride, a stronger sense of unity among tribes, and a generation of leaders who would push for change through law, education, and politics rather than through confrontation alone. The following decade saw progress, though never without challenge. In 1978, the American Indian Religious Freedom Act was passed, protecting the right of Native Americans to practice their traditional religions. It recognized